Welcome to our latest virtual town hall here with Peter Milobar, leadership candidate for the Conservative Party of British Columbia. As you may know, Peter is currently the MLA for Kamloops Centre and finance critic for the Conservative Party of BC. Before entering provincial politics, he served as the mayor of Kamloops, giving him experience at both the municipal and provincial levels. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me again and hosting Rachel. And viewers at home will be glad to know Rachel's down to 2 packs a day, so her cough isn't as bad as the last time she was on. So.
For those who are following my health update here, I was coughing on the last town hall very badly. May happen again tonight. I probably will. I've been diagnosed with pneumonia, so we know why, and it's not my chain smoking that's doing it for me. But thank you. So let's start with a couple of update questions. You were in the interior this week. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were hearing on the ground, what you did, and how the interior is doing?
Yeah, it was a good trip. I went down to Cranbrook and supported Pete Davis, great caucus colleague. Had a stroke in January, I believe it was, and it's amazing to see his recovery where he's gotten to, and he was able to do. We were down there for a heart and stroke 5K.
Oh,
And so myself and Rosalind Bird
yeah.
from our caucus went down to support Pete in that. And he did a test, 5K test a few days before. And on the day of, he took another 5 minutes off. So
Wow.
he did come dead last. I thought I got distracted as we hit the finish line. I was originally I thought I was walking behind him, and it turned out the timing bibs behind me, but that wasn't on purpose. But no, so that was really good. Then I did a bit of outreach and met with some party members as well, and some riding members with Pete, um, it's just interesting to see now that the membership list is set, what people's concerns are, similar to before, but really a lot of conversation around how are we going to win government.
Absolutely.
And then after that, I went to the Okanagan and spent some time around Penticton and Kelowna, and same thing, met with members, had good conversations, and the underlying theme by everybody was we need to form government. Like that is truly starting to shape up to be the kind of fundamental ballot question I think that most people are starting to formulate their heads around.
I think that online today I saw that you were officially the first candidate in this race to wear shorts at an event. Is that true?
That is true. I didn't have shorts in the 5K, but it was in the morning and it wasn't super hot. The next day I found a pair of shorts because it was 30 above pretty much in Kelowna, and we were right next to the lake, a beautiful spot to meet everybody in the sun, but it was a very warm day, and I thought, I would gamble and have my white legs showing in the sun. Haven't seen sun all year, but
Great.
yeah, and you know what? That's how people in BC, especially in the interior in the summer, live, right? So, I'm not going to try to, I've said it all along, I'm not going to pretend I'm someone I'm not. And so shorts it was.
Exactly. And what beautiful weather we're having across the province right now. So well deserved those shorts. New poll out today. Let's just get into it. What are your thoughts?
Polls are always interesting. This was paid for by the Elliott team, so and it's always interesting. Seen a few commentators online really dissect polls, especially in a leadership race, and point out that between the weighted vote across ridings, and you don't know how many members are going to actually vote. We don't know how many of the 40,000 will get verified.
That's right.
And then actually follow through even if they've been verified to vote. So, it's really just, as I've said all along with all polls, they're snapshots in time. You don't know for sure. What I do know is the one theme that's been consistent on the polls that none of the candidates have paid for are on the question of who can actually win and form a government.
Right.
And on those polls with the broader public, I have been the one consistently in all of those polls that has demonstrated that I can actually win a majority government. And the others are all in NDP Green coalition government, so at best. So, I think again, even those polls are a snapshot in time, and I think it's anyone's race, and we'll see how this unfolds.
And the polls that showed that you would form a majority government, those were a month apart?
Yes, those were they were a month apart, and then that recent one from the Ken Seiko group was a month
Right.
later, and that's where even amongst voters that voted for the BC Conservatives last election in 2024. I had the strong lead in that one as well. So again, snapshots in time. And same with the polls we saw today. I don't get too excited or too down on any polls. There's a lot of moving parts and variables in a leadership race, especially one with weighted ridings and a point system that we have. So we'll find out on May 30th how everything shakes out.
Exactly. The final poll, the most important poll. Let's dive into a little bit of news here. Prime Minister Carney today announced that there would be tariff relief for some sectors, notably the forestry sector left out of that announcement. Why do you think that was?
Well, have you met our premier? Um,
I have. He's much taller than I
Yeah,
am.
yeah, and me as well. But honestly, like we saw Ontario negotiate an $8 billion infrastructure deal with Ottawa as well, so that they could have help for municipalities to get servicing water and sewer and road projects going to bring down the cost of housing in Ontario, and BC was left out of that.
That's right.
We've seen BC now left out of something as critical as making sure there's some help for softwood dependent industry and towns in our province. And the best the premier came up with today was, I've done all I can do. Well, no, you haven't.
Hmm.
He's obviously not resonating with the prime minister. He's obviously decided he's got some ideological lines in the oil sands, so to speak, to stake out a claim. He admits that he can't stop the pipeline, but he keeps fighting it tooth and nail. And I think all of British Columbia is paying a price in a wide range of sectors as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, I'm going to go to some audience questions, bounce back between my questions and theirs to make sure we get everybody's in. So, the question from Steve is, as an electoral area director, I'm often challenged about getting provincial government support for local infrastructure, roads, water, sewers, like you were talking about. How would you see a BC Conservative government support unincorporated communities for local infrastructure like roads, water, and sewer?
Yeah, good question, Steve. And I know many Steves in the electoral area world, so I won't even guess which one this is. But I was chair of the TNRD for 5 years. I was a hospital board chair there for another 5 years, and a vice chair for 2 years. And so I'm very well acquainted with this. And at the time I was there, we had 10 water systems that needed funding in a program that was oversubscribed. Managed to get the board to agree to a prioritized list, a unanimous prioritized list of those 10 water systems. And while other regional districts were still arguing over their priority list, we had all 10 of ours funded over the space of a couple of years
Wow.
because the government needed to get the money out the door,
Mm-hmm.
and none of the other regional districts could agree on what should take precedence.
Hmm.
So, I have a lot of experience of these challenges. The gas tax was a big help to unincorporated areas. But especially on some of the services and programs they provide, there definitely is an imbalance in terms of access to provincial funding. We do need to take a look at things like this. And I said in the last debate, we can't turn this into a student council race where everyone's promising, soda out of the fountains. But there are some low-cost areas, comparatively speaking to the provincial budget, that we need to start investing some dollars. And we need to actually, in our rural and northern areas, recognize that what a town needs help for a couple of $1 million to take control of their transition away from a forest dependent community or something like that, that they have that support. When you have regional areas that are unincorporated, really just needing help with some of their fire service costs or some other very low costs on the grand scheme of things, we have to get away from this one size fits all and find some of those dollars out there to help these smaller asks, smaller needs of our rural and northern interior communities that just need that little bit of help. They're not asking for SkyTrains. They're asking for some real world help that they need. So I fully am on board with trying to figure out a way to make that happen.
Okay, I want to dive into a few questions about you and your leadership. Um, you're the only candidate who has actually been a mayor and a sitting MLA. You're the only candidate that is a sitting MLA currently. What have you done in Kamloops, your time as mayor, that you would do for all of British Columbia?
Yeah, it was an interesting time being the mayor. I was the mayor in the regional district chair at the same time, and only mayor of Kamloops to ever have that bestowed upon them. It's a yearly board vote. So for 5 years, the board kept agreeing that they were comfortable with my leadership, and that was an elected board of 26. Our council is 8 councillors and a mayor, and it's not party system like in Vancouver or Surrey. So it's really about building consensus and building buy-in, especially on the bigger issues. Probably the biggest thing over the span of being the mayor was that I came into the mayor's chair in 2008. That was right when we had the housing crisis hit North America.
Of course.
Cities were across North America and Canada were laying off firefighters and police officers because remember, cities can't run a deficit.
Hmm.
They were letting infrastructure fall apart. They weren't keeping up on it. In Kamloops, we expanded our police, we expanded our fire services. We built a sewage treatment plant on time and on budget, largest capital project in Kamloops history at the time for a single project, and unlike what we see unfolding on the North Shore. We had, transit hours added, parks added, and we kept property taxes under the rate of inflation. And so that wasn't just me, that was council as well. But, I was the mayor, I was at the helm of that. And when I look at the dumpster fire that Eby has created in BC,
Yeah.
we're facing very similar challenges within BC right now. And so I do have a track record and experience dealing with this. We didn't have, public unrest, and we didn't have labor strife. We worked with the unions to find efficiencies and kept hiring under control while still keeping costs under control. So, yeah, it's a little more complex, provincial versus the size of the city of Kamloops budget, but the fundamentals are there, and it doesn't take me that much longer to read a few extra zeros on a balance sheet.
Yeah, no kidding. And that experience is so critical, especially at this time in this province. Okay, I'm going to go to a question from Megan. The NDP seems to have a policy of co-governance with the Indigenous. Do you believe that this is possible? Is there a way forward for BC that is not co-government with the Indigenous peoples?
Yeah, and thanks for that. Really, the co-governance, when you really drill into the fundamental reason that DRIPA needs to be repealed, it's the
Hmm.
co-governance piece, because that's not workable. And I said this back when the government was trying to do Land Act changes before the last election, and then they quickly retreated from that when public pressure got too great on them, and we were pushing hard about that you need to have the Minister of the Crown be the final decision maker.
Right.
And so, and
Mm.
regardless of who the government is, Eby and some of his ministers make questionable decisions, but you still need to have that minister be the final decision maker. So it doesn't mean you don't still consult and talk with and take into consideration the perspectives of the Indigenous communities in the affected areas, just as you should with mayors and city councils and residents as well, non-Indigenous residents. But then the final decision making and the final sign off, the final authority has to rest with the provincial government. And I think that's really underlying everything. It's really been stripped back now, and everyone's suddenly hearing co-governance and they go, wait a second, that
Mm.
doesn't seem right. And that's really at its core with DRIPA. What is the problem?
Mm. Okay, back to questions about you. Why are you the person who can actually bring conservatives together in this province? Not an easy task.
No, it's not an easy task, and it's always been a shaky allegiance with right of center parties. But I have a long track record of consensus building
Mm.
and working with large groups of elected officials to move forward. But I've always been able to do that because I respect everybody's opinion. I respect giving them voice, making them feel like they have some value to the team, and getting them doing what they feel like they're having good input or job satisfaction, for lack of better phrasing. So there's that side of it, but even within the membership, it is again about respecting those divergent voices, making sure that we're headed in the same direction, but we're having those conversations, we're shifting policy to be in tune with the public and what the needs of the public are. I mean, ultimately, we are here to serve the public,
Hmm.
and it's about pushing the envelope sometimes, but it's also about delivering on what public expectation is. And so that also includes always keeping fresh and modernizing your worldview and your perspectives, and that comes by having a large party that actually is willing and open and able to have those broader conversations.
Okay. question from Tracy from online. If you are elected premier, would you repeal the Short-Term Rental Act provisions that terminated the legal non-conforming use for short-term rentals in BC and restore the legal non-conforming use? Did that make sense?
It does, and it
Okay.
makes sense because I was in the legislature when this all came forward, and
Oh,
so that's one of
that's
the
about
that's
it.
one of the things of being the only person in this race that actually has a seat in the legislature, and in any modern history, in terms of being around for a lot of these destructive things that the NDP have done. Because I've
Mhm.
been in the legislature the whole time
That's
the
right.
NDP have been government in this latest iteration. And so, yes, this is the commonly known as the Airbnb ban, is what I'm assuming you're referencing. It's created nothing but problems. We need to actually get back to a level where we're not dictating how people can create some passive income for themselves, how they want to rent their accommodations out. I get the concept around making sure we don't have these large companies of 500 or 600
Mm,
Airbnbs assembled under one corporate entity. But I think we can find that happy balance while we're still providing a lot more freedom into what would be a reasonable portfolio for some individual or their family to have versus, the big corporate pension fund type push for that. We have a lot of purpose-built Airbnb type housing that came in, and
hmm
people simply are moving out of that on a regular basis because they're not finding it a proper accommodation. In fact, I actually talked to a gentleman in Kelowna yesterday,
mm,
and he said he has these two women that were waitresses. They were saving a few $100 a month at his place than what market rentals other places would be, but they were both servers.
mm,
And because tourism had dropped because of lack of Airbnbs in
mm.
Kelowna, their actual income had dropped by much more than
Right,
what
of
they were
course.
actually saving on rent.
Yeah.
And on top of it, they still moved out because they said it's just too small for them to live on a daily basis year round because it's actually meant for short-term stays.
Wow.
So I think we have to be a little more realistic about this. And I
Mm,
voted against it when it was first brought in,
mm.
and I still say it needs to have a massive, massive overhaul.
Okay. I'm going to incorporate some of what you said into this question, but David Eby is a skilled politician. Why are you the best candidate equipped to beat him in a general election? And part of that is the fact that you're the only one in this race that has gone toe to toe with David Eby, and you know the opponent.
Yeah, and I go to toe with David Eby on a regular basis, and I think that does matter.
hmm
Question period is a different environment. Being out, talking with the public once you have a defined role is completely different than being a private citizen that is dealing with theoreticals and throwing out ideas on social media. You can ask even somebody that runs for city council,
Mm.
and they're surprised because they think, geez, I was so beloved beforehand. Everyone was always patting me on the back when I shared my thoughts on social media.
Yeah.
Now that I'm elected, it's a different tone and tenor. And it's
Mm.
yes, because now you have the ability to actually vote on those types of changes. And that's even at the city council level. So at an MLA level, at a leader level, the expectation is completely different on how you would interact with David Eby and not.
Yeah.
I have that experience, and frankly, I have the current relevant experience. The world has changed a lot since 2011 in
hmm
terms of how social media is used, how it's used in the political realm, how you deal with people. The workplace in the legislature is completely different than it was in 2011. And so all of that is completely different realm as well. And I'm frankly the only one in this race that still has that ongoing kind of um, changing with the times as things have developed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a unique position to be in, to be able to uh, go and potentially become the leader of this party and show up on day one fighting the guy that you have been fighting for how many years now?
Yeah, 9 years. I mean, here's the thing. When they were talking about extending the House by an extra week to deal with DRIPA before Evie did his tap dance
All the
and
different.
song and dance, That would have been June. I think it was first to second, third, and fourth, right? It would have been that week. Well, we would have picked a leader on May 30th. Would have I been successful? Should I be successful? EB extends the House to June 1st. I'm literally standing on the floor asking him questions as the leader of the opposition.
Right.
That is a massive difference. And and
Absolutely.
and the other problem is for anyone else in this race, if they go to seek a seat in the House, as soon as an MLA resigns to create that space for them, we've handed David Eby an 8-month extra seat in the chamber to win votes with.
That's right.
That is a big problem if you want the government gone as soon as possible. We
Mhm.
need maximum numbers of seats and trying to pressure the government as best we can.
Yeah, and I just want to dive into that because I think that a lot of people don't realize how critical you having a seat in the House is to this race and to the future of the party itself.
Yeah, it does make a difference. Leaders get more coverage when they have a seat in the legislature.
Yeah.
They just do. We even saw it with Pierre Federley when he was getting ready for his by-election, even though he wasn't even in the by-election yet. There
Hmm.
was less federal coverage.
Yep.
And that's not a knock on Pierre at all. That's just the way the system works. And it confuses the public short for short term, but the biggest thing is we don't know which MLA would be willing to give up their seat. We don't
Yeah.
know where that would be. It has to be in a winnable riding. I mean, we won a lot of close seats. We lost a lot of close seats, but and that means those ones that we won that were close are not slam dunks that we automatically win them in a by-election.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to it. I've certainly heard it come up. For some people, it's a big voting difference, a
Hmm.
differentiation point between myself and others. For others, it's not, and that's okay. But that's what a leadership race is supposed to be, is that people kind of collate all of their little touch points within their decision making, and they decide on balance which person they would support as leader based on all of these factors.
Exactly. And yeah, I think that's a point I just want to hammer home because when you think about it playing out and who's going to go into the premier's office after an election, somebody needs a seat to be able to do that. So I want to ask you, speaking of your experience in the legislature, uh, this question is from Vladimir. And he said, could you please explain the current status of Bill 9? FOI in the BC legislature. I'm particularly concerned about the proposed NDP changes and their potential impact on transparency and accountability. As a personal example, I've been fighting for 4 years to obtain my own information from my employer and union, and the case has now been referred to the commissioner, yet I've still not received my records. We need to ensure freedom of information remains freedom, not just in name.
I couldn't agree more. So there was FOI changes that were brought in a few years ago. I spoke against those. I questioned those at length, and I voted against those. That's when they brought in the $10 fee for FOI,
Mm.
amongst other things. In this case, interestingly enough, it's what time is it now? 25 after 7.
Yep.
It was literally about 3 hours ago.
Mm.
I spoke for half an hour in the legislature on this by Zoom, and so. I delivered another speech today against Bill 9, voting against Bill 9 because it's not right. It is a piece of legislation that will further erode the public's ability to access information. In this case, your own information from your own employer and fighting that way. And
Wild.
in my case, as an opposition MLA, my ability to properly scrutinize what the government is or isn't doing, who are
Mm.
they meeting with, why are they meeting with those people? All of that starts to get harder and harder to access. And this is
Right.
a government that has been hiding information in plain sight, so to speak. Unfortunately, very, very often, it's like pulling teeth to get an answer out of them
Mm.
in question period or in budget estimates. So this type of legislation will make that even that much harder.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, one of the issues that we've been talking a lot about this week is the cancellation of the Burnaby Hospital. That was something that you, as the finance critic, stood up on budget day and said, this is TBC, to be canceled. And the government was saying, no, 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 it's not going to be canceled. It's just postponed a little bit.
Repaste.
Repaste, that's their term. I've never heard that term,
Yeah.
but I'll take it. How did you have that insight? Like, learning how to deal with them, quote unquote, hiding information has been a long path for you.
Yeah, it's especially being the finance critic for the last 4 years. You start to learn where they try to hide information, where
Mm,
they have to disclose it, but they don't want to disclose it.
right.
You start to learn where they're trying to distract you away to some other area to not pay as much of attention. And so, that was interesting that they're still, even today, we're in question period. The minister was still denying things have been canceled.
Oh my gosh.
Yet everybody's been fired, all the equipment's been told to leave the site and vacate the site, all the
Exactly.
contracts. So, it's that type of diving in. And why it's concerning is because we don't know what some of the other aspects of that decision were. And under FOI, you could FOI decision notes by the minister and briefings that the minister had
Mm-hmm.
as they were walking through deciding to cancel 6 long-term care facilities, cancel a hospital, cancel student residents, but they've also canceled a lot of other housing projects in my Kamloops area. They canceled a school that 4 years ago they said they supported and approved, never put money in the budget, and now they've just announced that's no longer a project that's going to happen either. So we're finding these pockets all over, and with FOI, you could at least have a fighting chance to find it. Now, the government has a higher opportunity to try to hide things.
Hmm. Not a good system. Okay. I'm going to go more to audience questions because they're coming in fast. This is a question from Robert. Good luck on the vote, he says, and thank you for your service. My question, if elected leader, how would you stop the culture of delays in this province? For example, 5.5 years for a court case, years to twin a pipeline, seniors waiting hours in our ER departments. I can go on and on forever. You get my point?
Yeah, and you start by identifying where the choke point is, and then you instruct your minister to deal with it.
Hmm.
So I'll touch on seniors in waiting forever in emergency rooms or in hospitals. We have 6 long-term care facilities that have just been canceled by this government. We have a shortage of long-term beds for seniors. That means seniors are stuck in hospital rooms inappropriately,
Hmm.
not a proper living environment. It's not good for their mental health. It fills up the hospital beds unnecessarily. It pushes people into the hallway for hallway medicine. It forces it back into the emergency room, which then creates a 12-hour waiting room wait for you in an emergency room.
That's right.
And that's all ideological because the government says they can't afford 1.8 million a bed. And I agree with that statement from the government. But the private sector says they'll build them for 600,000 a bed. So if they could get their own ideology out of the way, we could be building these rooms for a third of the cost
Yeah.
and actually free up all of that other healthcare capacity. So that's how you start to address these delays. So the delay in the emergency room is directly tied, quite frankly, to shortage of long-term care spaces. And so that's how we can actually start to address, and that cuts through everywhere else in government as well.
Okay, we have a long question from Cheryl, so hold on here because I think it's an important issue and it's actually something we've done a few of these town halls together. I'm not sure we've talked about this yet. So, you mentioned you would repeal BC's ICBC no fault system, a very contentious issue in the province, restoring tort law in BC and bringing back fair injury claims, removing the minor injury cap for those with injuries that affect their lives. Are you striving for these changes before the next election? Can you share your plans? Currently, the statute of limitations for the BC Civil Resolution Tribunal is only 2 years. Human Rights Tribunal, only 1 year. Civil cases for bad faith conduct is 2 years. Will you be extending the statute of limitations for dealing with ICBC struggling with injuries?
So I've never had the question around statute of limitations, but I wouldn't be able to affect that until we were government.
Mm,
So we just tried, Sheldon Clare tried bringing forward a private member's bill that would change the definition of catastrophic from 2 amputations to one,
mm,
because he has a constituent who lost her up to her hip, her leg, and that does not count as catastrophic in this new ICBC world. And the government refused to move that forward and pushed it off to an ICBC committee that is starting to look into what's going on within this new structure of no fault.
mm,
I want to be 100% clear on this. Like, we need to expand access to fair settlements through the courts because the standard right now is much too high to meet in terms of criminal conviction. Because what we're finding is a lot of people just get charged under the Motor Vehicle Act, and then
mm.
you are at the mercy still of ICBC. You don't get access to the courts. So we have to broaden and expand how and when people are able to access the tort system. But I want to be mindful, and this is again where lack of transparency by this government makes it really, really tough.
Mm.
You need to be in government to actually be able to properly sit down and dig into the ICBC books and figure out what it truly would do to the rate structure for
Mm.
how far you actually push the envelope. If I had my druthers, it would be that we would put all the ketchup back in the bottle and go back to how it was previously. I don't know that's possible without massive rate shock, and I think we have to be mindful of that as well.
Mm.
So there's going to be a bit of a balance there, and I'm just trying to be as honest as possible with people on this. And I've talked to trial lawyers about this as well, so they know where I stand on this. It's really about wanting to know the true numbers or not, while still expanding people's access to the justice system and the legal system so that they can get better and fairer settlements than what ICBC is offering on a wider range of issues.
I think that sounds pretty fair. Yeah, big change in that system that has really detrimentally affected a lot of people. Um, let's talk about another change, and that's UNDRIP. So, a question from Donald. I agree UNDRIP has to go, and I'm glad to hear you say you won't put up with blockades. But realistically, what would you do if an armed First Nations person blocked a highway? I just want to make sure we don't end up with an OKA style standoff as we saw in Quebec in 1990.
Yeah, and I mean we still have that iconic photo from Oka with the
Okay.
soldier and the stare down that happened there. But we also we can't govern out of fear either. And so not repealing DRIPA does not guarantee there wouldn't be disruption or unrest on the other side of the equation. And so I think, again, I mean it when I say we have a rule of law in this country. Like
Hmm.
people are allowed to protest. And yes, the lawns of the legislature will likely get very loud and very noisy, and they have for decades in this province, and that's okay. But if it's illegally blocking projects or bridges or things where injunctions are in place that people aren't supposed to be, then the police do have a job that they're supposed to carry out, and that's enforce court injunctions. And we need to stand by them and support them doing their job because we can't, on the one hand, say we need to support our police when it comes to all sorts of crime and safety issues, and then say, oh, we're not going to support them now when they're enforcing a court injunction.
Hmm.
And I say that regardless of, it's not even if this was a DRIPA thing. This could be any type of protests out there. We need to be mindful of that and fully support and recognize the free speech and the protest aspect of our true free democracy, but also recognize the boundaries that are placed around that ability to have those freedoms at the same time.
Okay, another hot topic in this race. Peter, would you repeal SOGI? Asks Bill.
Yeah, yes, I would, and I think there's a wide range of opinions as to why to repeal it, and as I've said in other town halls in person, where some people maybe don't agree with why I feel it needs to be repealed, and we need to reevaluate what's going on in schools doesn't match theirs, and I say we can do the good conservative thing and argue about the why and
Hmm.
not support each other in an election and watch the NDP continue on. Or we can both agree it needs to be repealed. You have one reason for it wanting to be repealed. I have a different reason for wanting it to be repealed, but we want the same end result. And the end result I want to see is I do want to see kids protected in school. We have a charter of rights and freedoms where kids are supposed to be and need to be fully protected in school from bullying, intimidation, violence, anything to do around race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, any of those areas. That still needs to be protected full stop. So I want to be 100% clear about that. But we have to recognize that the age appropriateness of a lot of teaching, but not in all classrooms, but a lot, it keeps pushing the envelope. It's making a lot of parents uncomfortable. We need to get back to enabling and allowing parents to have some of these teachings and learnings of certain areas with their own families as they're comfortable within their own culture and within their own life,
Hmm.
and not rely strictly on the schools to do that. And the backdrop I put that with is we're seeing ever decreasing numeracy and literacy and science levels in our schools. And we have scarce instructional hours.
Mm,
We need to be refocusing those instructional hours to better outcomes in those areas and less worry about some of the social justice side of the world. It doesn't mean you walk away from all of that teaching and learning as well. So we have well-rounded citizens coming out of school. We absolutely need that.
hmm.
But we have to recognize that we need to have more focus on those core fundamentals at the same time.
Okay. Megan asks, do you believe the federal government is interfering in provincial jurisdiction? How would you handle that?
Well, that's a pretty broad-based question.
Hmm.
I think from time to time the feds do meddle, and I
Hmm.
think from time to time municipalities overstep their bounds, and sometimes the province oversteps their bounds with both of them.
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of staying in your lane, and regardless of which level of government you are, because I think when you don't, it creates confusion, it creates added cost to a level of
Hmm.
government that shouldn't be taking that cost on. Um, Here's my view of the world, and I'll tie it maybe together with the broader how do you keep a bigger tent together.
Mm.
I always say I do not worry how you vote federally.
Right.
I really don't. If you share what I've been talking about tonight as kind of underlying underpinnings of what you feel are provincial matters of interest and better healthcare, better crime and safety results in our streets, better education outcomes, better private sector economy, the repealing of DRIPA and protecting private property rights, then you're more than welcome under my leadership. And you'll feel welcome, and we're going to hear from you and listen to you, and same with people that have what would be termed a more social conservative focus. Again, it doesn't mean I don't even agree with some of what they're talking about. It's just it's not what I proportionally spend a lot of my time thinking about or worrying about.
Mm.
So we need to do that. But I use Danielle Smith as an example, and it ties in directly to this question. No one will ever say she's not a conservative. She is more than willing to take the federal government behind the woodshed from time to time and tell them to back off. And she's also working with the federal Liberal Prime Minister to build a pipeline. And it's a pipeline I agree with and support. But that's the point. You need a premier and a cabinet that is defending BC's interests when
Mhm.
it's appropriate, defend it against the federal government, regardless of who the prime minister is, because they have a federal mandate. It's not always aligned with every single province. And then we have to also work with them when it's advantageous for BC and the rest of the country to actually recognize we have a part to play in a national economy at the same time as our provincial economy. So my view is that, and my MLAs working in caucus that I was the leader of, I would make it very clear. Like if you want to dwell on all the federal issues, you should have ran to be an MP
Mhm.
because we have MPs all over this province. We pay them a heck of a lot of money. They do work very, very hard from all political parties. We can entrust them to do the work in Ottawa that we send them there to do, and you can entrust us to work in Victoria on the stuff that you've entrusted us to do.
They also do a heck of a lot of flying
They
across
do.
the country.
They do. I was almost going to announce that I was going to seek the nomination in Kamloops for the Federal Conservatives back in 2006.
Wow.
I was contemplating it, and at the last minute, before I called a press conference or anything, I decided I wouldn't do it because my kids were still younger, and I realized I wanted to spend more time with them. And as a result, I ran for mayor in '08 and did that for 9 years, but I was still able to spend time with my kids, run my business
Mhm.
that I owned, and still be able to coach in various sports that the kids were involved in. So I think I made the right call.
The kids are grown up now, though.
They are. They're in their late 20s, early 30s. So now we got four little granddaughters under the age of four. So
Oh, it's
yeah.
so cute. But I want to talk about the relationship federally, provincially, also when it comes to funding. I mean, the federal government pays for a lot, frankly, pays for a lot of projects that are, coalitions between provincial and federal funds. What would you do to advocate for those federal funds? Because we've seen that really decrease under this current government.
Yeah, again, I think it goes to track record and ability, demonstrated ability within government circles of how to work and negotiate and find common ground and then advance in areas maybe where you don't totally agree, but you leverage one factor with another. We have to be realistic. That's how the political world works. So again, I go back to you have the premier saying he opposes a pipeline, but he also says he recognizes that he can't stop it.
Right.
So we all know what he's going to do because he does this every time.
Mm.
He's going to flip flop and he's going to eventually support it. So how would he just actually, leverage that to actually get something out of Ottawa? Like, I
Right.
don't know, $5 billion for infrastructure after Ontario just got eight.
Exactly.
Or, get a better health transfer that the feds have just announced is going to be cut nationally in 2 years, which will be about, I believe, $3 billion to BC's bottom line.
Mm,
It's these types of things, the softwood, and when we're seeing aluminum and copper and steel being getting some bailout help from the feds and softwood being left on the sidelines again. Again, Premier missing in action on all of these types of files. We deserve better in the province.
amen. And question from another bill, perhaps. As an MLA, what role did you play in the new water treatment plant in North Vancouver? Budget 700 million, but now 3.5 billion. I almost laughed at that. I can't even believe it. How is that not criminal?
Yeah, I hear you. Again, I was a regional district chair, which is the same as Metro in my part of the world up in Kamloops, and we did water systems. We had, I believe, we had a liquid waste as well for a small unincorporated area, and I don't understand how that got to be where it got to be. I really don't. I certainly dealt with water and sewer projects in the city of Kamloops as well. Again, different size and scope, but it's all proportional, and how you manage that and how you ask the right questions as an elected official matter.
Mhm.
And so I'm not sure how that happened. As an MLA, we had zero discussion, input, or line of sight, especially as an opposition MLA into this. I know that moving forward, I've likened it to, if you give your kid your debit card to go on a first date and tell them only to spend $100 and they come back and they've spent 1,000, do you keep giving them the debit card?
Maybe they really like the date.
Yeah, yeah. So you just say, you know what? Maybe on major projects, certain regional districts need to be reined in, and we need to bring in right from the get-go proper oversight, independent oversight as the discussion starts to happen. We still need projects to move forward in metro areas. Uh, but the lack of oversight or explanation or understanding of how this got to be where it is, if ever there was a time, I think, for us to layer in that extra oversight of specific project specific things, I think it matters. I see the board now talking about downsizing the number of committees and things like that. We did that when I was the board chair
Mhm.
15 years ago, and we did that. Saved costs, and I still kept getting reelected as the board chair, even though it was fewer meetings with fewer stipends being paid to the directors. So you can do it. You just need to actually be willing to do it. So again, I have a track record and a history of actually delivering the types of efficiencies and cost savings we can actually do without needing a civil war over it.
Hmm. Okay, question from Jacqueline. I like this one. What are your thoughts on BC potentially losing the Whitecaps soccer team? How would you have handled the situation if you were premier right now instead of Evie?
Yeah, you know what? I said this back when they announced that there was the 1 year reprieve with the stadium deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is the actual plan on all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't begrudge the teams from trying to negotiate deals and try to figure out a way to stay solvent with arena deals and everything else. I frankly negotiated an arena deal with the Kamloops Blazers when I was the mayor as well. They get very complicated. There's signage, there's food and beverage, there's naming rights, there's all sorts of things. How do you cut up the revenue? How do you share it? What do you get for a cut of the ticket price? All of that. But it can be done, and it can be done in a fair way, and then you announce it to the public and everyone understands what's going on. In this case, it looks like the provincial government has no clue what they're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and looks in this case aren't deceiving. Looks are accurate. And so, when there was that 1 year deal announced, the last second, it's in a backdrop of then the minister saying, well, maybe we'll do the same thing for the Lions. Well, what do you mean, maybe? You haven't thought this through? What does it mean for concerts then? Like, are there profits or sports teams? Or do
Yeah.
concerts suddenly say, well, we'll come, but only if you give us the venue for free?
Mm.
There's no cohesive plan on what they're going to do. Now, if you want to tie it to economic growth and tourism and everything in the city, then that's fine. then show us why you're subsidizing what you're subsidizing
Mm.
for that spin-off. But it doesn't sound like the province has done any of that work either to try to explain what their plan moving forward is for BC Place. We've got FIFA where they're puking money into it. Mark my words, it's going to be $1 billion. And you know they cut out the Symphony of Lights. They cut out all these smaller scale big tourism draws to the city, so we can spend $1 billion, and they're going to try to tout some economic benefit from it, but they don't want to actually tell us, and that's where the FOI law comes into problematic as well. So I don't know that a deal could have actually been worked to actually make it finalized. What I would say to the owners of the team is, if at all possible, just don't leave. Try to hold on a little bit longer so we can get rid of the NDP. And I'd be more than happy to sit down with you and try to see if there's not some tangible way that we can make things work that makes sense for the overall economy of British Columbia while keeping a team here and not having any, you know, hardcore line in the sands that you're not even willing to at least have a discussion about. I mean, this is a province that willingly let Hastings Park shut down and close horse racing
Yeah.
under the guise that that's where they were going to help the Whitecaps with the new stadium. And here we are a few months later. Now we have no horse racing for the future and potentially no Whitecaps. Like they literally don't know what they're doing.
Hmm. What's your favorite sport?
Growing up, it was hockey. And
Did you
still,
play?
I played. I was horrible. I was 10 years old and finally got to start playing, and I was an ankle skater. By the time I was 14, I had made our AAA Bantam team. By the time I was 15, I was the captain, and we
Wow.
won all our tournaments and provincials that year. So, you know, I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm
Hmm.
not afraid of setting a goal, and I'm not afraid of leadership roles. And I've, you know, had those pretty much my whole life.
Do you watch hockey?
I do, but not a lot of time when you're campaigning. So I tend to wait for the playoffs. Shout out to Logan Stanko from Counts because he's doing really well in this playoffs. Happened to bump into his dad when I was flying to Cranbrook, and his dad was flying down for game one for Carolina, and he scored 2 goals in that game as well. So,
Wow.
so you know, it's good to see a Kamloops kid doing well. So,
That's cool.
yeah.
Okay. Renee says, in light of the province blocking media access and therefore public access to a recently closed SRO in Vancouver, how would you increase transparency on the results of the project that public tax dollars were spent on?
Yeah, BC housing's a mess. You know, they at the time that they bought that hotel for $55 million,
Mm.
they were dramatically overpaying across the province. In Kamloops, in my riding, they bought a very old three-story, essentially walk-up stick frame, um, old style apartment, 42 units. Had had a big fire a couple years earlier that damaged a couple of the suites and had been sitting empty for a couple years. They paid 3 times assessed value for it, and it took them 2.5 years later to finally move people in, like later than they first said people would be moved in at a way higher renovation cost than they ever said
Hmm.
originally. And then I see what's happened, and that was purchased around the same time as the $55 million hotel in Vancouver. That's a mess as well. So we need better transparency. We need to better understand what's going on with BC Housing in terms of why are they spending so much. There
Hmm.
seems to be certain uh, motel operators or motel owners. I wouldn't call them operators that seem to acquire motels and then sell them relatively short order back to BC Housing at immense profits.
Hmm.
And we've never been able to get the government to take an actual look at that or shine a light on that. And so I think there's a lot of areas that we need to clean up within BC Housing to make sure we're back to the core fundamental of it, which is actually providing safe housing for people that desperately need it and get out of the way of all the other stuff that they're creating.
I want to ask you before we're out of time here, quickly about healthcare access. Wait times and access to family doctors are a major concern across the province, affecting a lot of families, a lot of seniors. What specific changes would you make to improve access to healthcare in the province?
Yeah, so I've touched on the emergency room piece, you know, these urgent primary care centers that they've opened up everywhere. I've cautioned people for years now that Kamloops is the canary in the coal mine. They opened it in Kamloops. We were the first one, and all of our walk-in clinics closed.
Oh,
And we've seen that happen in Vernon. We've seen it happen in Prince George now. I keep warning people, do not celebrate an urgent primary care
oh,
center coming to
interesting.
your town.
Hmm.
They see way fewer people at a way higher cost in a day than a walk-in clinic. It's not like an emergency room. And so we need to address those issues as well. And we have to listen to the doctors who are saying that if they had some help with their charting, how they do it, and the softwares and that they use, if the government stepped in and helped a bit there, it would free up 15, the equivalent of 1,500 GPs. Now,
Wow.
let's say they're even off by 50%. That's still 750 GPs worth of time. Kamloops, where I'm from, 40% of our population does not have a family doctor. It's simply not acceptable.
Crazy.
We need to do better. People deserve better. And we need to find ways to better streamline some of these processes that government has laid over top of everything. Some of it is the amount of forms you need filled out by your doctor to access certain government programs.
Hmm.
And that's a problem as well because people don't always have obviously ease of access. So we have to find other ways to maybe get those forms filled out to still meet the goal and the intent that was originally there for needing the form in the first place, but not having to tie up a GP to do it.
Hmm. And when you talk about that, I've heard you talk specifically about disability forms, that it's a repetitive process for many people.
Yeah, for many people it is. There's some where it's fairly boilerplate and it goes through and they don't have to do it very often, but there's others that it's a very tedious, stressful, cumbersome process. They need to either access a nonprofit if they happen to have one in the town that will do that for them.
Hmm.
But if they need to start finding doctors and that, it becomes very, very problematic for them. So there's a lot of areas there that we can improve for people for sure.
Okay. Question from Jen. I might be our last question. We'll see how long your answer is. I think it might be a long one because this is a big issue. Would you repeal the so-called community benefit agreements? Um, Maybe you can talk about their quote unquote benefit, which drives up public infrastructure costs and excludes open shop construction companies.
Yes.
Figured that might be your answer.
So again, as someone who was in the legislature when these came forward and spoke and voted against, I've been opposed to them all along. Now, I want to be 100% clear. I'm not opposed to unions, especially in the construction sector. They do great work. What I want to see is open bidding. And if a unionized shop gets the contract from the government, great, let's get building. But we need to be focused on value of money for the taxpayer. The NDP are 25% over budget with their capital spending, which is why we're seeing hospitals literally being canceled, long-term care homes being canceled, why they're 158 years behind schedule of their capital plan of the projects that are under construction. And so that's what we need to be focused in on.
Hmm.
The problem for those that don't know what the community benefit agreement
Mhm.
is, it only enables about 15% of the unionized workforce to actually access, of the construction workforce to access government projects that they deem to be subject to these agreements. And so it really shrinks down the bidding pool of number of companies that can bid. So again, if a unionized shop can win the bid, that's awesome. Go ahead and get building, get those jobs, and get those people working. If it's a non-union shop, once we get this economy rolling properly, there'll be lots of work for the unionized shops to bid on as well. If they don't succeed in a government contract, there'll be some other private sector project that's going that they want to bid on as well. So that's really why I'm fundamentally opposed to them.
I mean, we've seen community benefit CBAs, community benefit agreements, now for a few years, but I think a lot of people don't have exposure to them or they don't really understand what they are or specifically why the NDP brought them in.
So the NDP are very good. They put all sorts of names on things to make it sound better than it is. So community benefit agreement makes you think that it's like they're building parks or they're doing something like that. And so then when you say you're opposed to them, say, see, you're opposed to community benefits. No, it's about which unions can actually have people, members working on these projects. It's about apprenticing numbers. It's about Indigenous and women in the workforce as well. But all of those numbers were being met you can insert those numbers into an open bid contract as well,
Mm-hmm.
and people bidding will still meet those benchmarks. So you don't need to have the process they have if that's what you want to drive for, to try to expand the women in the trades and things like that. You can totally do that. And so that's the underlying problem, is that they create this. They created a flipping tax. Well, what it actually is it's a capital gains tax on your primary residence. From day 365 first 365 days of ownership, it's a large tax. From day 366 to 730, it slowly progresses down to zero on if you sell your primary residence.
Never
But
thought
I
about
asked the
that.
minister, and
Hmm.
I flat out said, because again, I was the critic and I was in the legislature. I said, so wait a second, can you change the 730-day threshold to be whatever you want by regulation, which means they could do it right now. They could sign a paper as we're sitting here talking,
Oh.
and it's changed. And it could change to day 7,300, which means it's now a 20-year ownership before you pay zero capital gains tax on the sale of your primary residence. So they've created the fundamental framework for a capital gains tax on a primary residence sale, and they don't want to call it that. They got very mad when I
Hmm.
called it that, because they call it a flipping tax.
That's
And
so
it doesn't
interesting.
actually prevent flipping. What it's preventing is you being able to sell your primary residence
Hmm.
in a 2-year time frame without paying the government a bunch of extra tax.
I've literally never thought about it like that.
Yeah,
Very insightful. That's what experience does.
that's right.
All right, we have 1 minute left. So why don't you close by just telling people why they should vote for you?
Sure. So, experience does matter. Having a seat in the legislature matters. Having a proper grasp on where we're at financially and where the trouble points are in this province is critically important. We have $100 billion dumpster fire that David Eby has created as our provincial budget. And so we have to be realistic about this, about how we're going to get things under control, how we're still going to provide core services people rely upon, how we're going to get spending under control, get our economy going. It takes a lot of experience to do that. And when you have a caucus, a new governmental caucus that will be made up of 45 people that are under 4 years of experience or less, having someone at the helm that actually has a bit of experience probably is a wise choice.
Mm.
And so we have all of that in the mix, and I think I bring that pragmatism, that common sense, and honesty and integrity to the role that conservatives are looking for. So yeah, I'm quite happy with how the campaign's been going, how I've conducted myself, what I'm running
Hmm.
on, what I'm standing for. Everything you've heard tonight are my own views and thoughts. I don't have a team in the back, from within or out of province writing all of my speaking notes for me. These are things that I've been literally talking about in the legislature on everybody's behalf as the opposition for the last 9 years. And so, I have a very good grasp of why I'm saying it. I know exactly what I'm committing to or not, and I know what is actually realistically deliverable or not versus, just promising anything and everything to have a good sound clip for a vote.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. That's the pitch. And thank you, Peter, for this very informative. I learned a lot, and I've been listening to you for months. So, very informative town hall tonight. Apologies to anybody whose question we didn't get to, but we will be hosting more town halls in the coming days. You can check online for when those are happening. To make Peter our next leader and premier, we do need you to vote. For members of the party, you will need to complete the online verification process in advance of the vote. You should have received an email from the party with instructions on how to verify your identity. Voting is taking place from May 23rd to the 29th. And I think you have until May 20th in order to verify your ID. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, thank you very much and good night.
Good night.